Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. I am so excited to be here today with Rebecca Wood, very good friend and dedicated activist. Of how long have you been doing this stuff, Rebecca? I don't want to date you, but it's a long time.
So I actually started in January of 2017. That was our Charlie and my first protest that we attended. Before that, I was a park ranger.
That's awesome.
So
So Rebecca is you've organized on so many issues now, but your origin story has to do with Charlie's healthcare, correct?
correct. People want to know how I got started in all of this because it kind of snowballed. But it started because my daughter, Charlie, she's now 9, but in 2017, she was 4. And she was 4 at our first protest, and she was born at 26 weeks gestation. She was 1 pound 11 ounces when she was born, and that meant her birth was a pre-existing condition. And by that point, we had been through so much with her healthcare needs and fighting insurance and making sacrifices just to get her where she was. When I saw the ACA was under attack and there was a pretty good chance it was going to be repealed, I wanted to do everything I could to fight it because she would become uninsurable, and all of our work, all of her fight would be for nothing, because once she became uninsurable, she wouldn't receive services. She would have trouble getting her orthotics, basic needs. My biggest fear was that I worried how I was going to feed her if she became uninsurable, because she had a feeding tube at the time, and insurance paid for obviously a good portion of it that nobody can really pay out of pocket. So that's what brought me to the game. And then I guess life experience, as I continued on, I kept running into obstacles and things, and I would get frustrated. And I thought, why is this a thing? Why does this even exist? Why is this barrier there? And when I'd run into it after the initial frustration, there would be this thought of, I can change this. I can, fight this and make it better for everybody else as well. So,
Well, and it's like whenever you talk about this, because we've known each other now, it's
we're like Capitol Hill besties.
like Capitol besties. Yeah, we should tell some crazy activism stories at some point, like within the near future. I like it really makes me feel crazy because you are a healthy, employed woman who it blows my mind that the wickedness of the healthcare system is something that anyone can miss. I mean, this was Charlie's your first time mom. It's like this isn't and you're fighting to get your child basic health care. I mean, that's terrifying. Like, you should be focused on the fact that your firstborn daughter has health issues that you need to handle. You shouldn't be fighting with anybody, financially speaking.
Yeah. It was a harsh reality to come to. And that's one of the things I want people to understand and realize, that nobody should know who I am. Nobody should know my name. Congress should have no clue who I am. All of these things, because my story should be, my daughter was born at 26 weeks. It was tough as a mom to deliver early. We got health care, the end. And that's how it should work. And that's how it works in every other industrialized country, pretty much. And here in the US, that's not the case. And the first time I told our full story, because most of 2017, I focused on Charlie and her pre-existing condition. But while I was on Capitol Hill, I realized that a lot of what happened to us wasn't fate, wasn't bad luck. It was bad policy. And so I told our first our full story for the first time when at the Bernie Sanders Medicare for All introduction. And if you watch that speech, you could see I'm visibly nervous, and it's not because I'm doing a presser, because by that point I did a ton of press conferences for the ACA, but it was because I was about to out myself with something that only like 3 or 4 people knew about. And which was our full story, which was how paying for Charlie's health care depleted my ex-husband and my savings, and it ruined our hope for home ownership. And then in the end of our marriage, I was having to make choices whether I was paying for Charlie's health care or mine. And that ultimately ended up costing me all of my teeth and parts of my jaw because of an infection. And that in itself was stigmatizing and embarrassing. And none of it should have ever have happened. And I think I realized that during the ACA fight.
Well, and I mean, first of all, I mean, I've told you this before, Rebecca, but thank you for being willing to share, because I do think your courage, one, is a model to so many people, but two, your story isn't uncommon. And that is what is like so upsetting to even be having these conversations, because it's ubiquitous. We talk about, and this is what makes me feel literally crazy. We talk about these issues as if they're, oh, wow, that's so sad that happened to you. No, this is happening in every family in some way, shape, or form. Unless you are literally a multimillionaire, you cannot afford healthcare in this country. You are a mom that had a baby with it's pretty, like, it's not normal. I'm not trying to minimize the trauma you went through, but like, it's not like this is an insane thing to have a complicated birth, right? And it just makes me feel insane, like, as your friend, and also just as a person living in this country, that this story even exists. And I can't even imagine the stress that took on your marriage. Not much less like the rest of, like, being a parent isn't easy in the best of circumstances. Sorry.
No, it's fine. No, there's so many aspects that are upsetting to me. One of the first things I try to make clear is because there is this set of representatives and even people in our country who think, oh, well, if you live a certain way and do the quote right things, then you don't have to worry about this. And I tried to make it clear to them that we did what they consider the right things. My husband and I were both college graduates. He had a good job with healthcare with what we thought was good healthcare coverage. And we were married, a 2-parent household. I had no risk factors when I got pregnant. I wasn't even advanced maternal age or any of that. So we had no reason to believe that any of this could happen to us. And then I remember when they diagnosed me with preeclampsia and they hospitalized me because it was severe. And when I was hospitalized, I kept saying, this is a mistake. They're going to figure out it's a mistake and let me go home soon. And that wasn't the case. And so then, as the situation grew more and more intense with I developed something called HELP syndrome, which is a severe, I think it's a severe type of preeclampsia. I could be wrong, but it's hemolysis, elevated liver enzymes, and low platelets. And a lot of women die from it when a pregnancy reaches that point. And so I had reached that point and I was starting to die, and Charlie had more coming out of her than going in through the umbilical cord. So she was starting to die. And so she had to come out. And so, it was like, first I was diagnosed with preeclampsia and we were hoping for 33 weeks. Like that was the goal, 33 weeks. And I once I hit 25 weeks, like the end of 25 weeks, I had HELP syndrome, and I was only able to stay pregnant for 10 hours into her 26th week. and they had to deliver her then. And it was an emergency C-section under general anesthesia. So we missed her birth. So that was another big thing. And it kept snowballing with the crisis of her birth, and then hitting the insurance obstacles and having to fight all of that. And then watching our savings dwindle. And then the surgery where I ended up losing all of my teeth and parts of my jaw. And it went, by the time Trump won the election, my ex-husband and I just looked at each other and shrugged. We were like, of course. We were so used to bad news at that point, it did not even faze us. Other people were crying and upset, and for me, it was just normal at that point.
Well, and I mean, I love that you emphasize that you did everything right. Right. Because first of all, I want to start out with poverty should not be a pre-existing condition. Poverty is also a policy problem. So I
Yeah,
really hope,
absolutely.
like when we talk, because I like to emphasize that this happens to privileged people as in ways people don't want to talk about. But like obviously it shouldn't be happening to anybody. It's there. And but so I was having a passing conversation with a privileged individual just this week, and I mentioned, like my boyfriend and I want to have kids, but we don't, like, this is a crazy country to have kids. Rebecca, this person literally looked at me and was like, oh, like, have you heard of people who just like aggressively save money? Like, I'll send you some books. It's all about like how ways you can cut costs. And I was like, I don't really think that saving a couple extra pennies are going to get around the fact that we live in a country where healthcare costs are the number one cause of bankruptcy.
Yeah, I don't have to tell my story to poor people. They live it every single day. It's privileged people I want to shake and say, you need to wake up. You could be next. You could wake up tomorrow and somebody in your immediate family could have an illness, a heart attack or something, and you're going to be right here with me. And I really hoped that in telling my story to Congress, because, I spoke at the Bernie Sanders in Medicare for All bill introduction, but then I testified in front of the Ways and Means Committee. And I hoped by telling my story that I would be one of the last, that people would look at it and say, holy wow, this could be me. And it would scare the heck out of them. So it would, light a fire under them to get on this. And unfortunately, we're not seeing that happen. And it's incredibly frustrating.
Well, and it's one of those things where, yeah, I mean, I literally just want to tweet out everything you're saying right now at separate points because they're all so important. But you're right. You do not have to explain to anyone marginalized in this country this process. They know it already. And they know it with healthcare. They know it with housing. They know it with, I mean, I talk to people that are even just like a little bit older and more privileged than us and came of age in a different political and a different financial situation. And it makes me feel just crazy because you're like, oh, like it's always hard for young people starting out, and like, oh, like, sometimes stuff just, nothing that's happening right now is normal. Elizabeth Warren gave a great interview about Build Back Better where she was talking about, okay, here's what happened. Here's the soundbite. For 100 years, America was investing in the middle class. We were investing in infrastructure. We were making education more affordable. Wonderful, exciting scientific advances were made in modern medicine, which made it safer and healthier to be alive in this country. And then all of a sudden, the Reagan administration happened, and we stopped doing that. And we let profiteering 1% Wall Street type people start to gradually roll those advancements back. And you do not have to be a policy expert to see that everywhere. I mean, I say this on the show all the time. I'm a pretty privileged person for my age, and I live in a 400 square foot studio apartment, and I'm lucky. Like, I was excited to find this, and that's the thing. Like, people our age, we have roommates. We have, like, we're finding all these workarounds. and that's not normal. It's just not normal. And I
No,
don't understand how everyone looking around isn't like, WTF, this is crazy.
I know. I think the biggest scam of my lifetime is that we somehow have been taught to get angry at other poor people and fight each other for crumbs while the wealthy run off with the cake right in front of us, you know? And I, whenever somebody, makes a comment about immigration or about poverty or anything that's negative towards those marginalized groups, I just jump on them and ask, why are you angry with them for the crumbs or the little bit they get when, you have the 1% just running off with everything?
We really have a very warped idea. And even conversations about privilege can get frustrating because it's like people are fighting each other over small, very, very
Very petty
small,
things, yeah.
instead of, okay, the really terrifying fact of living in America right now, unless you have $5 million in the bank you can access at any time, you actually are one disaster away from being in a very bad situation. There's I really recommend this book to anyone. It's a little bit off topic, but it's called Pound Foolish, and it was written by a financial journalist in America about how the financial health industry is a big scam. You can't save your way to prosperity in America right now because the policy decisions are so out of control that people's retirement savings aren't growing. People are losing, I mean, you've probably heard this advice, Rebecca, this like, yeah, just save your pennies and put them in it and you'll be fine. And she's like, what? We're telling people this that we know is not true. That when people, again, are one medical or housing emergency away from losing everything, there's a story in that book about a woman who had something like 6 million saved for retirement, which, I'm sorry, that's a lot of money. Okay? But her daughter had some kind of health crisis. Her husband had some kind of health crisis, and it was gone within a few years.
Yeah. It's incredibly frustrating for me. And as bad as things were when I lost my jaw and, my teeth and everything, I thought, okay, well, at least I'm at the bottom. I'm on a floor I can't fall through. But then I became a single mom, and I could not believe all of the obstacles I ran into. People talk about that show Made on Netflix right now. And
I was hoping you would bring that up.
Yeah, it's a very good illustration, but at the same time, I find it incredibly frustrating because first of all, they never talked about how she paid that ticket in the beginning. Like, where did that money come from? Why, because if you don't have money for that, you go to jail, you lose your driver's license, you run into bigger problems that cost a whole lot more there. So I wish they would have dealt with that more. And also, when she took her kid to the doctor, my thought was, who's paying for this? How is she getting this medicine? Because when I was a single mom, our healthcare costs crushed me. I was choosing between medicine or food because that's how much it crushed me. High housing costs too. My daughter and I lived in an apartment. We just actually moved in with my partner a couple months ago. But before that, we lived in an apartment. It was a 1-bedroom, so it wasn't big. It was 670 square feet, but it was mine. And I was actually very proud and happy to be in it. But it cost us $2,500 a month in rent. And you look at that and you think, that's absurd. Find a cheaper place to live. Well, Right. Well, the problem for me was, I lived on the border of Revere in East Boston, which is a working class neighborhood, but it is closer, close to Boston. So it's pricier than if I lived further out. But the problem for me was I couldn't afford childcare. So my day consisted of dropping Charlie off at school, jumping on the T, riding to work, being at work, then jumping back on the T, picking her up from school in the afternoon. And then if I had to go back to work or a work event that night, just taking her back with me to work or a work event. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I lived further out. There was just no way. So the lack of childcare was forcing me to pay more in housing. And so there were all these things that I ran into that I didn't really see dealt with. Well, I think, they did a great job, probably the best, showing a single mom that I've come across in quite a while. I think there's a lot of issues and opportunities they missed out on discussing and covering that I wish I would have seen.
See, I knew this was going to happen. Just like, I now have like 17
You're like, oh, Rebecca's
directions I want to go on. First of all, the whole point of this was Build Back Better. And so I just want to emphasize that it has been so refreshing to hear childcare talked about and discussed as infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Because people are like, oh, no, it's not. Infrastructure is a bridge. Okay, I'm sorry. In Dwight Eisenhower's America, people could live on one income. People can no longer live on one income. So if two people need to be in like, even if you get your Christian 2-parent home, that's not like a real thing anymore that exists. I see people do it. I'm like, okay. And then you know what you find out? Somebody's family is rich.
Or they tell you we live off of less. And I'm like, that's great. But what happens when you get sick?
Exactly.
Exactly.
You're either betting on it, like, and by the way, people, I shouldn't joke because some people do it and I think that's great. But I think, it makes me crazy, Rebecca, because it's like you and I talk about this a lot. Like, no one our age even thought about who was informed about these things, seriously considered being a stay-at-home parent. Because it's like, when I mean, not forever, because it's just that's not the world we live in. I would love to have a world where you can have a single income family. That would be great. But the next thing I was going to bring up, which has nothing to do with Build Back Better, but you and I talk about a lot, is partner privilege. And that's another reason that we need universal childcare, because it is unconscionable to me that we live in a world where women are head of households more than they've ever been, and are responsible for more than they've ever been responsible for. And they are receiving no support from that. Like, there have been so many people talking about the gendered impacts of the pandemic, where women who are working from home are doing more childcare and home care than ever, and they're being asked to do more at work. Oh, and there's still a wage gap. Like, it's disgusting.
Yeah. I actually saw a tweet or a comment or something, and I can't remember who said it, but they were tweeting about childcare and saying something about women deserve to have careers. Childcare is about women's careers or something like that. Yes, women deserve to have careers. It's fine. But for me, childcare is so much more. A career feels like a privilege. Childcare is about women's survival. As a single mom, I was so lucky that I had so many people just lend a hand anywhere where they saw that I was struggling. Because honestly, Charlie and I would not be here right now. When I lived in Virginia, in order to make the money to move to Boston and have an income during my time in Virginia without childcare, I drove for Uber Eats with Charlie in tow. And, I'm ashamed to say it. Sometimes I had her with me 11 to 12 o'clock at night, because that's when money is made in a college town. And once some people I knew, I wasn't really good friends with them, I just knew them from our social circle, heard about it. They said, hey, we can watch Charlie. And that freed me up to work more and make more money and not, suck up the childcare and stuff like that. And then I've also, I've done a bunch of school lunch work here in Boston. Our district I struggled with lunch debt as a single mom, so I pushed our district to do district-wide free school lunch through the community eligibility provision. And the Boston Globe came and did a story on it and took pictures of Charlie and I picking up our free school lunches and everything, because we are the only ones who would be on camera to say that we were poor, which is why I say poor people, because I don't think there should be shame in being poor, because people being poor is a policy failure, not a personal failing.
Thank you.
But anyhow, after those pictures went out, some strangers sent local supermarket gift cards. And that really helped us get through the pandemic. Little things like that, where we are so lucky that people did that, because I have no idea how other single moms are making it through this, how they're surviving, because it is quite impossible without a community reaching out and giving what they can.
Which is, I mean, look, I don't know if you guys can tell, Rebecca's a very likable person, but you shouldn't have to be a likable person. You really shouldn't. I don't know if we've actually ever talked about this. My mom was a single mom, and it's like had a lot of, it was really only in my 20s that I started to understand the stress that she was under for much of my childhood, because it's like the tremendous, and it absolutely is a gender issue, and it is why, again, like, seeing childcare in this bill is just, it makes me crazy that anyone would want to fight that. Like, you can't, our society is asking more of women than it ever has. Women are still the primary childcare providers. They are still doing the primary emotional and domestic labor of running a home, married or unmarried. Oh, and there are more single mothers than ever before, and men are entirely let off the hook. Not always, obviously, not always, but it's like, so what are the solutions? This pro-life movement that's all about women having all these babies, great. Where is that energy when those babies are there? My mom, so my mom is Catholic, and she became in the family way at 20. So she had me because she was pro-life. And I'm obviously glad she did, but I have a lot of anger at that movement, honestly, because it's like, okay, everybody, when my mom was pregnant and having me, she's so inspiring. It's like, and then what? And then what? Seriously.
I have a lot of frustration at the movement. I don't know if it's anger, because, I think you should believe what you want to believe and live how you want to live, but also I don't think it should dictate policy. But I have a lot of frustration with it because they claim life is sacred. And I want to ask him, the people who show up to make noise about pro-life messaging, where were you during the ACA fight when my daughter's health care was at risk? If you're pro-life, you would have been there. If you were pro-life, you would be fighting hunger issues. If you were pro-life, you would be fighting homelessness. If you were pro-life, you would show up for immigration. All of these are pro-life issues. So it's not about being pro-life. It's about being anti-woman and being in control of women's bodies, which is not okay.
And that's the thing. I mean, I think that, you've said this, like, feeling nervous and ashamed. Again, to repeat, Rebecca, thank you for being willing to share about your life and your story, because it isn't uncommon. Because I really do believe that this shame we all have about admitting the truth of our circumstances is one of the big things that keeps us from organizing in the way, because the Build Back Better agenda is not, I call it a really progressive bill a lot because I mean that as a compliment, but it's actually not a terribly progressive bill at all.
No.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You go.
Oh, no, no, I was just gonna, no, I interrupted you. My apologies. I was just gonna say, no, it's not progressive. And that's why it always makes me laugh when people will try to dismiss me as a leftist or a radical. And I don't really identify anywhere on the political spectrum. I'm more of an issues interested person. And I think that if you're sick, you should be able to go to a doctor. If you're hungry, you should have food in your stomach. If you are in a country where you can't survive, then you have a right to seek asylum here in the US. And I don't think those are radical ideas. I think it's just decency. And it just blows my mind when people write that off as extremism when it's not. And in most developed nations, it's probably very conservative.
Yeah, and I love that you say that because so we did a show with Congresswoman Jayapal, who's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
And she, the objectives of the Build Back Better agenda are childcare, expanding Medicare because teeth and eyes and
Mm-hmm.
ears are not luxury, providing an easier access and an easier path to citizenship, and bringing down drug prices and climate crisis stuff. I mean, like, these are things everybody should be. I almost don't want to call it the climate crisis. I want to call it human survival. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like people hear climate crisis and their brain goes to polar bears and saving the whales. I'm very pro polar bear, but at the end of the day, I'm more self-interestedly don't want to die in some preventable natural disaster. But the point being, all of these things, as you're saying, Rebecca, are actually very middle of the road interventions we're talking about. Nothing, especially when you're talking about providing asylum to people from Haiti or Mexico, or a lot of these countries that people are fleeing from are places where we have exacerbated, if not caused, civil unrest and massacre of civilians. And we're seriously not going to just let them come here when study after study shows that higher immigration rates lead to a thriving economy and a better life for all of us, and that these people pay their taxes and they follow the law. Why would we not want that? It gets back to what you just said, control. It really is just evil. Everything we're fighting against is just moral evil. There's nothing political about it.
When it comes to immigrants, I think about how scary it must be to leave the only home you've known to a country where you don't speak the language, you don't know the customs or how it works, and bringing your kids along on that terrifying journey. That there is a level of desperation there that I have yet to experience. And I'm horrified with us as a country for not reaching out to all of the people who are desperately seeking refuge and asylum here.
Well, and you talk to anybody, I mean, I guess it depends on who your friends are, right? In my incredibly non-scientific polling of all my friends who do relocate here
Mm-hmm.
from countries that, our racist classification system calls developing, almost all of them would rather be home because in America, we have this tolerance for working 3 jobs, or maybe you do have a professional career type job, but then you're working it all the time to have what? That mentality doesn't exist in a lot of other places
Mm-hmm.
in the world. No, this stereotype, actually, you want to get pop culture with it. Okay, have you ever heard of the show 90 Day Fiance?
Yes.
Oh
This is
my god,
actually
okay.
a pop culture reference. I know what you're talking about.
So one of our friends, Tanya, was on it because her her fiance is South African. So I got really into it because I'm like, all right, I want to watch Tanya's season. I think 90 Day Fiance is a great crash course in American racism because every single person. So for those of you who don't watch a show, the premise is it's one American and they're in love with somebody in another country. Either they met online or maybe they actually do know them, right? Like maybe they met them while they were traveling there, whatever. But it's like star-crossed lovers, different countries. And I am shocked by the racism and xenophobia because almost always what it is the American wants their person to come live here. And the person is like, oh, America? I don't know, man. That's a lot. What if you move to Brazil? Like, but the American family is like, they're just trying to get a green card. They're just trying to use you. Everybody wants to come here. No, no, everybody does not want to come here. And it's like, I really believe that show. Like, if you want to look at American xenophobia and our attitudes towards races, towards immigrants that we don't even think about, like, it's always some beautiful woman from a different country who has no desire to leave that country. And yet, when she meets the American family, the accusations are like, oh, you just want a green card. You just want to be in this country because it's so great. Very few people of any country or any nationality have some strong impetus to leave everything they've ever known forever. Why would anyone want that? I mean, I love
family,
Europe.
their friends, everything is just left behind. And when, like I said, when I was a single mom, it was a crash course in starting to have to start anew. And, I thought I had been through the gamut with Charlie's birth, which was brutal emotionally. And then with our insurance fight and then losing all of my teeth and parts of my jaw, I thought that was as bad as it could get. But then having to start over again as a single mother was brutally hard. I did not think I was going to make it. I probably cried every day for about 1.5 years trying to make it work and everything I ran into. And I can't imagine anyone choosing that willingly just to come to a country. Circumstances must be dire for that level of desperation to flee here. And
again, yeah.
I don't understand the xenophobia and the hatred towards people.
It's a really disturbing, I've done a lot of shows this week around Build Back Better, and whenever I go out of my way to look at the rebuttals, because I think you should, I'm just struck by the wickedness of the baseline ideas that we have in this country, that we ourselves aren't owed basic survival level dignity, and that we don't owe that to other people. That's a really shocking thing. You break it down not even that far to say that, oh, pharmaceutical companies, because we talk about this on the show a lot, but quick refresher, the way this works is the United States government gives billions of dollars to the pharmaceutical companies and the healthcare companies to develop these scientific advancements, which are very exciting. And then they turn around and charge us, the American people, the taxpayers who paid for these things, thousands of dollars, exorbitant prices for these services and drugs. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting. We are literally being taxed for our own exploitation and, in some cases, murder. Again, 45,000 people a year die because we don't have single payer. Harvard public health did that study. Not exactly a known radical organization, being one of the oldest and whitest institutions out there. But I mean, okay, I can't believe have talked so long, and I want to talk about your activism around Build Back Better specifically. Rebecca and I were on a kayak. Part one. But you've been down here a lot recently. I know you've been organizing with CASA for the immigration rights aspect of the bill.
CASA's been organizing. I've been showing up as an ally. I don't want to take credit for their amazing action because it was huge. It was amazing. There was a marching band behind me, the group I was marching with during that giant march of thousands of people through the streets of DC. It was really something, and I'm so lucky to have been able to attend and support their message. But then the following week, I was down in DC. It was for the people's, gosh, I forgot the hashtag. They're going to kill me now.
Oh, it's okay. I won't kill you. I'll think about it, but it's
put it on afterwards on the screen as an edit. So we were outside of the Capitol all week with Sunrise, Center for Popular Democracy, some CASA groups. Trying to think who else was there. It was a loose group, so I'm not positive on everybody who attended. But people came as they could. Some of the Sunrise students came between their classes at George Washington and hung out in front of the Capitol. And we just tried to make it clear. Oh, it's the People's Watch. That's what the hashtag is. I was going to say, try to make it clear that we were watching. But not only that, but then the West Virginia group, is it Young West Virginians? Or...
Okay, now that I'm in trouble because we interviewed them and they were incredible.
Yeah, they were amazing. So they had that action on the Potomac in front of Manchin's houseboat every day that week, where a bunch of us got into kayaks and e-boats and helped Build Back Better related signs, and his neighbors hated it. The gentleman parked next to him would scream at us, and he threatened to spray us off with a hose, which when you're in a kayak, you're pretty much already wet. So it was like, okay. But I was privileged enough to be able to support them in their action and add to their numbers. And so that was cool. And then the congressional baseball game. Did you go to that?
I didn't, but I saw it and it was awesome.
Well, it was weird because when they mentioned that was a possibility for an action, I thought, who on earth would go watch a bunch of Congress members play baseball?
Okay, first of all, that is the correct response. Second of all, Brad is off camera, and I wanted to hear his thoughts on this because he's very pro baseball, but very anti Congress.
Oh no, I love baseball. I grew up watching baseball. I love it. Like I love healthcare policy, chemistry, jazz, all of those things. I love baseball. But when they brought up that game, I was like, who on earth goes to watch that? And
again, Brad said they're staffers.
yes, they're staffers. That's true. I love baseball.
Brad says, I love baseball so much that I watch people who are actually good at it.
But so when we were walking into the game, Brad is correct. Like the staffers all had shirts of like their Congress member. We walked past Team Paul, and like they actually had shirts that said Team Paul. And they were actually really into it. So I don't know. I was gonna say if you've ever been to a Red Sox game, but the crowd here in Boston is really into it. Like I used to go to Nats games when I lived in Virginia because, like I said, I love baseball, and I thought, I had experienced baseball, but when you get to Boston and the Red Sox fans, they are really into it. And that's kind of how the Congress game was with their staffers. They were really into it. It was.
Wait, so were you a part of the banner drop? How did this go down? Don't tell us any secrets, of course, but
so no, I actually don't like talking the details of our actions because I don't want to give away tactics that we might have to circulate or whatever. But so I think it was a Sunrise Group who was mainly responsible, but they had a banner. Everybody wore white, and they all sat in the same section. And they had three banners. I only saw two of them from my location, and the two I saw when they dropped them, it said, "Dems, don't F this up," with the full word. I don't know what your cussing standards are on this, so
You're better than I am.
I'm
I
trying to
think
remain
Brad was about to
PG.
kill me at a certain point in our life together.
But
I kept cursing on
it
air.
said, "Dems, don't F this up," and then the banner right beside, well, it was like right under it, that it said, "Our lives are not a game, pass," and then it had the bill number. So it was actually really good.
Well, that's an amazing action. And yeah, I mean, we only have 15 minutes left, so I just want to like emphasize to people, okay, here's the timeline. This is Biden's baby, essentially. And I bring up Joe Biden because every time somebody calls it, the media has just been terrible on this. Like, oh, far left progressives want this and they want that. This is Joe Biden's bill. I'm sorry. I'm old enough to remember when Joe Biden was the centrist candidate because I was here last year. And like this idea that like Joe Biden is some radical communist, like, I'm sorry. It's just too much. I listened to Congresswoman Jayapal give a great interview with the New York Times, and she was just saying what we've been saying. These are some pretty basic interventions. Nothing in here is really what the radical left would want. Radical left. But right, but like the Bernie Sanders wing is definitely not like asking for the world here. These are pretty basic. Let's lower some drug costs. Let's make childcare and home care for our grandparents. I don't know if people have missed this. Like, people, it is costing millions of dollars to put grandma in a home and or get her the home interventions that she needs, or grandpa, or whatever. This isn't about gender. The point is, like, I don't know what the disconnect is here. Maybe people aren't like, but most of us have had aging parents or grandparents. I know I do, and the costs are insane. The level of care is very bad. I lost a grandfather to COVID last year because of nursing home negligence. A lot of us did. I mean, that's literally what finally got Cuomo. We seem to understand that elder care in this country is broken. And so the idea that we would put money at a federal level into fixing that should be a no-brainer, right? I mean, all of us are going to get older. Even if you somehow manage to miss ever getting sick, ideally you will get older because the alternative is not as great. And you would think that people would want that. Like, I just don't get it. I don't get it.
I don't understand it at all. And the frustrating thing to me is that we are compromising on something that is already a compromise.
Yes.
It drives me mad. And it's also frustrating to me that the people who are making the trade-offs, who are making the cuts, who are deciding what's in it and what's aren't the ones left carrying the water. They're not the ones who will suffer from their choices. And that to me seems very unfair.
Well, and this is it where the disproportionate number of millionaires in Congress becomes very disturbing. Because again, I'm actually low-key fine with the millionaires. It's the billionaires that have my beef more. Because, like, look, hypothetically speaking, if you have a middle-class job and nothing ever goes wrong and you save half your income, technically you could be a millionaire at some point. Mm-hmm. That's true. Is it likely? No. But it could happen, you know? So I don't, like, millionaires aren't necessarily on the shortest of my short list, but the idea of people legislating for us, for the working poor, for the middle class, who don't have the concerns we have, is incredibly disturbing to me. And when you add that most of these people are in their 70s and 80s and aren't going to be around when their terrible legislation comes home to roost, is even more terrifying. And I don't think it's ageist to say that.
No, and I think so many times like what I would do in their shoes, and I would feel like for me it just seems like a no-brainer that when you're obviously towards the end of your life cycle that you think this is the last thing I can do for the country. I can step up and get this done, and this can be my legacy. Not, I'm going to line my pockets from lobbyists and cut everything I can.
Well, it's we're living in a really psychologically sick time. I mean, you and I talk about this a lot. I don't know, maybe that's what we have to do. Write a self-help book for members of Congress so they can find themselves. Like, listen, you've gone off the deep end. Things will start working
Like, go
out.
out a hero. Make this the last thing you do. And honestly, that's what they will be remembered for. Doesn't remember what errors or mistakes they've made through the course of their lives. If they passed a bunch of legislation that made lives better for everyone else, that would be what they are remembered for.
Okay, I was shooketh when I learned more about LBJ, because obviously you think of LBJ, you think of like civil rights movement, right? Or at least I did. And then I had more information and I found out he was like this racist southerner for most of his career. But then he had a come to Jesus moment. He had a road to Damascus moment, and he became a champion of civil rights. And which, by the way, is a testament to organizing and activists and Martin Luther King and all of, like, these people don't just wake up in the middle of the night with an aha moment. Not even because they're necessarily bad people, but because that's not how people work, right? I mean, you don't typically just wake up in the evening changed out of nowhere. It comes when you are receiving input and pressure and information. That is why we do the work we're doing. And the legislation that is even in play right now is a testament to activists like you, Rebecca. So thank you for that.
Don't thank me until we get Medicare for all.
Okay. I take it back.
That's actually my end game. When we get Medicare for all, I'm done. I'm never going on Capitol Hill again.
I like that. That seems like a good situation.
But we only have a few minutes left, and I just wanted to say to anybody who's watching that it is so important that you tell your story and your truth. And if you want to learn how to do that or how to do any of what I do, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or social media of any kind. I'm on Instagram as well. And I'm happy to talk about it with you, because my ultimate dream is to have a ton of people doing what I do, because one of me is scary, but a lot of me is when change happens. And that's what I want to see happen. And also, I'm kind of tired and would like to sit out some of these battles. So,
well, and I mean, that is such a good point. And I think about this a lot.
And the more of us there are, the more people to hand the baton off to, and then I can live my actual life.
So I think it's really interesting that a lot of people maybe who aren't in these spaces don't really understand how the most dedicated activists and people in this movement don't. It's not that we don't love it. It's more like, I don't know, my dream situation, I'd probably be like backpacking through Europe and writing poems. Like, honestly.
Well, I told Ben Wickler. Oh gosh, I love Ben Wickler, but he's a good friend of mine and Charlie's, or was during the ACA fights and stuff. Now that he lives in Wisconsin, we rarely get to see him. But I told him that I love this like a drug habit. I hate it. It frustrates me. It drains me. It interrupts my life. But for some reason, I can't stay away. And that's because it feels like duty.
I mean, yeah, exactly. And I'm going to just like switch it up on you. I'm going to say it's like a drug you just need, because unfortunately, like, our society is sick. And I think about this a lot. I think I'm jealous, honestly. I really am jealous. I see the people on the social media and they're like, oh, this is me at a pumpkin patch. I don't care about politics.
Yeah, I have some of those posts. When I'm actually living my life, I have those posts.
Like, I'm not anti-pumpkin patch, okay? I do basic bee stuff all the time. I overpost pictures of my boyfriend. It's fine. I'm not talking about that. But like, I wish I could just be like, oh, I'm sure they'll work it out. Like, I'm sure. No, they're not going to work it out. Seriously. Again, members of Congress are not just like wandering into the sunlight and being like, wow, I should fight for justice. I should do more. They're getting their pressure and their information from us. And we do need a bazillion more Rebecca Woods. They can have different names. I'm not trying to. But...
Well, you know, this is so a generic name that there probably are a zillion more. But
well, with that being said, your Twitter handle, it's at WoodRA, right? What is
it's at WOODRA.
Okay. Yeah, you guys should follow her on Twitter because she always is doing something awesome.
In pumpkin patches.
Sometimes.
But actually, I don't hate on the pumpkin patch people because, like, before 2017, I never thought about politics. That's a privilege I had. Mm-hmm. And now, 2017 on until relatively recently, it was about survival. And now it's more about duty. Now that I'm not struggling so hard, I remember what it feels like to struggle. And I feel like I should be there.
Well, and it's, you know, you and I have had this conversation like as friends, so I hope I'm not oversharing our business, but we talk about this a lot. Like, you know, I mean, how it's weird when you still carry the trauma of poverty when you're no longer poor. And it's a conversation that, you know, is important to be having. It's like, look, full disclosure, I'm fine, you know, like I'm great now. But that's semi-recent, okay? And like you still carry those scars and memories and it doesn't just go away, which is, oh, we only have 2 minutes. Seriously? Okay. I saw something on Facebook that I want to close out with. And then Rebecca, I'll let you have the last word because you're awesome. That really hit me. Somebody shared, a social worker shared a status about this. We in America, the sickest thing about America is we view trauma as an individual problem to be solved, when almost always it is a societal and a collective one. Every single thing that traumatized me is absolutely a collective failing. You know, whether it's sexual assault in a country which devalues female safety, whether it's the poverty trauma I have both as a child and as an adult. Like, these are not things that I, Jocelyn, like, wow, I should have been more positive. No, I'm so sick of this. Like, I am just so sick of it, especially because I am actually very privileged, like very privileged. There are a lot of people who don't get out and who had it worse. Sorry, Rebecca, we've got to close out, and Brad is saying we got to hurry. So say something, say goodbye.
Bye. If you want to talk more about this, reach out to me on social media.
Rebecca is amazing. You should definitely follow her and support her in every possible way. Thank you so much for being here, Rebecca. Honestly.
Thank you for having me.